listening to Women Infused Radio, where women in the marketplace connect with purpose and spirit, where the conversation covers all things women, business, and fascinating faith. And now, your host, Christy Lynn Olson.
Hello, and welcome to the Women Infused Radio podcast. I'm so glad that you came to join me today. We're going to talk about stress-free living on purpose. And I'm going to be giving you 10 strategies for de-stressing your life. I know you probably think that that's not possible, but it is, believe me. And there are a lot of ways that we can do that. You know, some of the top 5 stressors in life can be, and you probably already know this, but sick family members, money, financial issues, your own health issues, children, relationships, and work. And I know from my own experience that some days you frankly feel so overwhelmed and you can't even see the light at the end of the tunnel that you just think there's no end in sight. But after we talk about these 10 strategies for de-stressing your life, even if you only pick 1 or 2 and start practicing that on a regular basis, I know you're going to be successful. So strategy number 1, resist overcommitment and start eliminating. Now, how do you do that? First, I want to talk to you about, I'm going to be referencing a story in the Bible about Jesus and how he started eliminating the stressors in his life, because he did have a human experience on this earth. Even though the Bible says he was without sin, that doesn't mean he wasn't without experiencing the emotions and the stressors of everyday life, especially once he started his ministry. So I'm going to be referencing a little bit of that story from Mark chapter 6, starting around verse 4. Jesus told them, "A prophet has little honor in his hometown, among his relatives, on the streets he played in as a child." You see, Jesus wasn't able to do much of anything there. He laid hands on a few sick people and healed them, that's all. He couldn't get over their stubbornness. He left and made a circuit of the other villages, teaching other places. So you see, even Jesus got stressed and overwhelmed sometimes, and he had to figure out, what can I eliminate so I can start feeling more successful and not be so stressed? Now, one thing you can do is, sometimes what causes overcommitment is we get overcommitted to something that will take more effort than it's worth. How many of you can think of something about that right now? Or sometimes we try to do someone else's work. Or maybe we're trapped in a project that just saps all of your energy. And you know, that's a key. If you're doing something that is taking all of your energy, that is probably a clue that you shouldn't be doing it and you've taken on too much. Now, also, I'm going to ask you this question. Is your own stress self-inflicted? We are so good at putting pressure on ourselves, putting demands on ourselves, and no one else has asked us to do those things. I think sometimes we get that twisted in our mind and we think everyone is demanding things of us, and that could be true. But a lot of times, I bet if you really challenge yourself, you might find that a lot of your own stress is self-inflicted. So what are some things that you can start eliminating? Or what are some, what I like to say, lost causes that you can start eliminating? And again, if you're demanding too much of yourself by doing more than one person's job, that may be something you just have to set some boundaries on. Or sometimes an example of that could be, out of all in good intentions, you volunteer for an organization, but they never seem to have any work for you to do, or you're never quite sure how you fit in, and nothing gets communicated, and you just keep going back and going back and going back and getting frustrated. Sometimes you just need to stop overcommitting, and volunteer work is good, but you can't do everything all the time. Also, I think a huge thing about overcommitment is we try and do all of these things, and we're not truly in line or aligned with our values or our purpose. And so one thing you can do is just start eliminating those things that are not aligned with your purpose. Now, if you don't know what your purpose is, that's a whole nother conversation. But one of the things I do with my clients is we do a 2-day intensive life plan retreat, or you can get a coach. You can find people to talk to, ask some of your friends, and just really kind of hone in on what is your purpose, and then make some goals around that. So that was number 1, resisting overcommitment. Number 2 strategy that you can use is to resist over-controlling. Oh my goodness, how many of us try and over-control? Now let me pick up on that story that we just talked about, Jesus leaving because he really couldn't do a whole lot in the town that he was at. Verse 7 goes on to say, "He then went and called the 12 to him. He began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over evil spirits." These are his instructions. Take nothing for the journey except a staff. No bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but not an extra shirt. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, shake the dust off your feet when you leave as a testimony against them. They went out and preached that people should repent. They drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. So here's the key to resist over controlling is delegating. To whom can you delegate? And maybe that means giving up your need to get things done exactly the way you would have it done. Can you think of things that you always think, well, there's a certain way it has to be done and no one else could do it as good as I can? Here's a good example in my life. I grew up where we had to iron our bed sheets and our pillowcases. And I think we only did it because my mom probably wanted something for us to do. But I saw my mom ironing pillowcases. I saw my grandma ironing pillowcases. And I got to a point and I'm like, well, why are we ironing the pillowcases? And no one really could come up with an answer other than it was just a way that they can control the things in the house, and they had something to do. Another example of that for me is loading the dishwasher. I think one of the biggest conversations and disagreements my husband and I have is there a proper way to load a dishwasher? I don't think there is. My husband does think there is. So if I'm going to load the dishwasher the way I want to, I can't get frustrated when he loads the dishwasher the way he wants to. If I do, that's over-controlling on my part. Anything like that. Cooking, laundry. Clearly, I have a domestic goddess issue problem because I do not like doing any of the household chores. But there are certain things that I kind of like certain ways. And if I want it done that way, then I'm going to have to do it. But if I get to a point where I'm doing everything and I think no one else can do it better than me, I need to release some of that. So I want to challenge you to think daily or weekly, what are the tasks that you can start delegating either at home or at work? Now, I gave you examples of at home, but at work, same principle applies. Sometimes we think we have to do everything because we have a certain way we want it done. That doesn't mean it's the only way, and that doesn't mean it's the best way. And sometimes that's why we have teams at work. We need to allow people to step up into their giftings, but we also can't do everything ourselves. And so we really need to learn how to delegate and how to release control over that. So here's a caveat. You cannot delegate and then tell them exactly how to do it. That, by definition, is not delegating. That is still over-controlling. So, number 2, we need to resist over-controlling. Number 3, we need to resist overactivity and maybe learn how to rejuvenate. So, back to our story in Mark chapter 6. So, Jesus said, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." Sometimes during tragedy, during exhaustion, stressful times, it's important just to take time out to rest. Even in the midst of a busy season of life, you still need to take care of yourself mentally, spiritually, physically. And I know you probably know that. This is not rocket science. But how do we take care of ourselves mentally, spiritually, and physically? How do we resist being overactive, overbusy? I want you to think of ways that you can schedule times of rejuvenating. And again, I know that sounds like a luxury to some of you, but it really isn't. I think it's really something that you have to figure out how to do on your own, and you need to do it regularly. There's the book Character Makeover by Katie Brazelton. She has a great example, and I'm going to give you a few of the highlights of it, about how to build in a Sabbath rest. Now, the Hebrew word Shabbat or Shabbath means to stop or to desist, to cease from doing. Do you have regular time built into your schedule to cease from doing? Observing the Sabbath doesn't mean going to church and sitting down, being quiet, and reading your Bible. Now, that could be part of it, but when we talk in the next few examples about what the God the Father and God the Son did on the Sabbath, you might get a picture of what that fifth commandment really means. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. One thing God did is He enjoyed His accomplishments on His day of rest, on His Sabbath. You can look back and find something to celebrate in your own achievements for the week. Another thing God did is it says He delighted in His creation. So why don't you go out on a picnic or a hike or enjoy nature? You can create something. You can do a craft. You can bake a pie. You can paint. You can do, something that calms you down. I love to knit. I tried watercolors and I might pick it up again, but I took a watercolor painting class and I realized I'm a type A personality. That was not a good fit for me because I didn't want to put any paint on the paper until I knew exactly what it was going to look like at the end and what brush stroke should I use. So you have to find what works for you, but find something that you can be creative and that you can create doing. Now, something Jesus did on the Sabbath, he actually healed people physically and spiritually, which brought them joy. So maybe you make your Sabbath day a day of joy. Plan activities that are going to relax you or refresh you or just give you some personal healing. Do a fun project with other people or start a tradition of giving affirmations to people over a Sunday lunch. I have a friend who has a gratitude box. It's called Grateful Box. And she's teaching people how to write down every day something that they're grateful for. And then maybe you can reread them at the end of each week or at the end of the year. And just realize how grateful you really are for the small things. Or one of my favorites is to spend time writing in my spiritual journal. I have a separate journal just for spiritual times, and that has been a real blessing to me because I can go back over it and see how God has answered prayer and listen to how the Holy Spirit is speaking to me. And there's just a continuity and a pattern and a rhythm that I get into. Jesus also pointed people to God on the Sabbath. So you could focus on God by telling others about him and about how he's made such a difference in your life. And that's just one of the ways we can do a mini Sabbath. I also have some really great resources on how to take quiet time or to do a Sabbath. Both of them are by the same author. Her name is Ruth Haley Barton. And I'll put this link in the show notes, but one of her books is called Sacred Rhythms, How to Arrange Your Life for Spiritual Transformation. That, to me, was just worth it. It's a short read, but it gave me so many opportunities to understand what it looks like to create a spiritual discipline that will open you up to God's transforming love and power and the change that only he can bring about in your life. Another book that she wrote is called Invitation to Solitude and Silence. That one, a lot of people say, well, I can't go on a silent retreat because I like talking to people. If that's you, maybe you really need a silent retreat. And it's not because you should be punished, but think about maybe there are some things you're trying to avoid dealing with. And we'll talk about that in one of our other strategies. But the practice of solitude and silence really are radical because they will challenge you on every level of your existence. When you have to sit still, especially in this Western culture, if you live in the Western hemisphere, everything around us says you shouldn't be sitting still. You should always be doing something. And there's all this information overload. And so this time of quiet could really confront you on so many different levels if you really need to sit down and be still with yourself. So I'll put those links in the show notes, but that's one thing that you can do to rejuvenate. Look for a quiet place, look for some quiet time, and start practicing the Sabbath rest. Strategy number 4. One of the de-stressors you can employ is to resist frustration and focus on your passion. I'm going to pick up again Mark chapter 6, verse 31 to 34. It says, "For there were many coming and going, and they did not even have much time to eat. So they departed to a deserted place. Sorry, not a desert place. They departed to a deserted place. And many knew him and ran there on foot. And Jesus, when he came out, saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion for them." So this is where we have to remember in the midst of frustration, when we're feeling stressed, to focus on our passion. Don't become an adrenaline junkie who thrives on drama and pressure. When the stress escalates, don't get frustrated. Don't get caught up in it. Intentionally look for ways to be moved by compassion. You know, it's that old saying, when you take the focus off yourself and focus on something else, your problems don't seem so worrisome. They don't seem so big. And you can move beyond pity. That's what Jesus did when it says he looked on them with compassion. He moved beyond pity and went to supply a need. So sometimes if we just get activated and focused on someone else's needs, it takes the stress off our own daily life and it takes the stress off the things that we think are so bad. You can ask yourself some questions. Why am I here? Who do I love? What am I truly passionate about? And also start looking at the triggers that tend to trigger your frustration. For example, with me, anything that has to do with technology constantly frustrates me. Just when I want to print something, the printer doesn't work. Just when I need to send an email, my wireless goes down. It's always something. Now, sometimes we need to pray against it because we know that the enemy is the prince of the airwaves. And so we have to shut that down. We have to pray against it. But a lot of times it's just those little things and we just get super dramatic about it. We feel super pressured and we think we have to fix it right now. And we have to tell 30 people why it's not working. And then we have to tell 30 more people why we're frustrated. Instead, maybe just look outside of yourself and take a note from Jesus and be moved by compassion, go beyond pity, look to supply a need for someone else. I actually got to hear a speaker who was the sister of Michael Orr from The Blind Side, Collins Toohey, and she said something that will always stick with me. She said, sometimes a way to be moved by passion is to look for the value in others, especially others that seem to be overlooked and undervalued. So maybe when you're feeling frustrated and everything seems to be going wrong, take the focus off yourself. Look for someone who appears to be undervalued or overlooked and see if there's something you can do to supply a need there. Number 5 is to resist avoiding your problem. That's one that I bet a lot of you didn't think I was going to say. In our story, Mark chapter 6, picking up at verse 36, Jesus said, "Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." Or actually, Jesus didn't say that. Sorry, the disciples said that. But Jesus answered, "No, you give them something to eat." Now, the disciples thought there was a problem. All of a sudden, people were crushing in on him, and they're like, "Hey, Jesus, we need to get these people to go somewhere else, go get some dinner, because we need some time alone, and we don't have any food." So that's their problem, not our problem. And Jesus totally flipped it, and he said, you can't resist, or you can't avoid the problem. So avoiding your problem might delay the immediate pain or the immediate need, but it's never going to solve it. They could send all of those people away, but they're just going to come right back, especially if they can't find anything to eat. And they were looking for the food and the word of Christ. And so even if they didn't know that, they would have to keep coming back because they didn't have everything they needed. Now, your own problems, sometimes you need to deal with them head on, but we always like to resist. Another thing is some of you, I've notice like to wear your woundedness as a badge of courage. And I'm just going to tell you right now, you need to stop. It's frustrating for the rest of us, but honestly, it is going to be the most frustrating for you in the long run. If you continue to wear your woundedness as a badge of courage and avoid dealing with the problem head on, nothing is ever going to change. You need to own up to it, face it, and deal with it. And believe me, I know that is not easy. That is hard. An example would be you're having financial problems, or you're having problems in your relationships, or you're having severe health issues, or you're having a crisis of faith. Those are all things that are very important and probably have a delicate solution that you need to employ, but you can't be an ostrich and just dig your head in the sand. Leaving someone else to deal with your mess is not going to help anyone, especially yourselves. And sometimes I know you're just plain worn out and you think, I can't deal with one more mess. And it's easy to say, I'm just going back to bed, or I'm going to be an ostrich and put my head in the sand. But once we own up, face, and deal with our own problems, that's when you start seeing real transformation. That's when you can avoid that whole issue of getting frustrated with problems that keep circling around, especially the ones that keep circling around. One of the best things I can remember about this is I used to know someone who had she couldn't eat a certain food. She had a food allergy. And every time we went out to eat as a staff, she would eat that food that she knew was going to give her an allergic reaction or not make her feel good for the rest of the day. And so not only would she eat that food, but she took a time to tell us why she has to eat that food and why she shouldn't eat that food, and it makes her sick. But, I think she just needed someone to listen. She was just looking for attention. But I just wanted to say, well, don't eat the food. If the food makes you sick, don't eat the food. Don't keep telling us why you can't eat it or why you're frustrated that everyone else can eat all the food and you can't. And I know this sounds harsh, but I just have to be honest. I get so tired about hearing people that like to wear that woundedness like a badge of courage. And that's what I mean by that. If there's something you shouldn't be doing, or there's something that you need to stop, get some help if you need help. Get some encouragement. But don't dig your heels in and expect everyone else to change the world for you, because that's not going to happen. You need to be part of the change. You need to be the one to step up and own that problem. Number 6, one strategy that you can use is to resist overreacting. Don't react by, I'm going to use this word in air quotes, catastrophizing your problems. Maybe you missed a deadline, but there's always another way. And ladies, panic is not a strategy. Some problems are not yours to solve, and some problems are God's to solve. So break down the details of your problem and see who really owns it. That's something that I do a lot. And honestly, if I look at who really owns the problem, probably 80% of the time, it's not me who owns the problem, but I stick my nose in somebody else's business thinking I can fix everything. And don't always do a knee-jerk reaction. Take some time. Sometimes you just need a timeout. You need to reprocess. You need to reevaluate. And don't always solve all the problems for your family members. Sometimes family members need to sit in their own stuff until they can figure it out. It's kind of like a toddler learning how to walk. You don't want them to fall and get hurt, but sometimes they need to take that stumble before they understand what balance is all about. And the same goes for us. Sometimes we need to stumble. Sometimes we need to own up to our own issues so we can understand what that looks like. So talking about resisting overreacting, Jesus said, hey, you feed all these people. And the disciples then said to him, well, that would take almost a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? Well, of course, Jesus' answer, we'll find out what he said to that. But that was a perfect example of saying, don't catastrophize your problem. Maybe we can work together, and panicking and blaming other people is not the best strategy. So we need to take a look at that. The next strategy is resist getting overwhelmed. And I know these sound similar, and they are, but you can overreact, and then you can also, number 7, get overwhelmed. So we want to resist getting overwhelmed. And one of the strategies that Jesus used was to prioritize and evaluate. So when the disciples said, well, how are we going to feed them? And we don't have any food, and even if we did, it would cost a lot of money. So Jesus said, well, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. So that was a simple answer. Jesus basically said, prioritize and evaluate your situation. So he said, how many loaves do you have? And then break it down into smaller tasks. Go and see. And then the next thing that Jesus wants to talk about is he's going to help them stop getting overwhelmed. But sometimes it just starts, the answer is starting with a simple task or doing the big one first. Have you heard the phrase, eat the big frog first? Sometimes you have to do that thing you've been putting off, put it first on your list and just get the stupid thing done. But above all, remain calm. Also, not only can you prioritize and evaluate a problem, but I always say, what's the worst that can happen? How can you be prepared in advance, especially if it's something that you tend to see over and over again? And it may not be you doing it, but somebody else is doing it. So like, hey, every time my Aunt Mary comes over, she's going to talk about her foot surgery and I'm going to get frustrated. So maybe I'm just going to get us ready to play a game and we're totally going to take her off guard and do something fun and she won't talk about her foot. Who knows? But when I do this, I can boil most of my problems down to worst case scenario, no matter what it is. I can always boil it down to The worst case scenario is I'm going to die and then I get to be with Jesus in heaven. Now, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but honestly, if you think about it, the worst thing that could happen to me, if that's the worst thing, I'll take that. And that kind of gives me perspective and helps me remain calm at the end of the day by saying, you know what, if I totally screw up this presentation at work, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? They can fire me. I can lose my job. I can lose my home. Maybe my family members leave me. I get put out on the street. I don't have anything to eat. I lay down on the sidewalk and I die of starvation. But because I'm saved, because I've given my life to Jesus, I get to be with Jesus in heaven. So at the end of the day, what's the worst that can happen? You get to die and you get to be with Jesus in heaven. Now, I know that I'm over-exaggerating on that, which probably was one of the points I shouldn't over-exaggerate, but stop getting overwhelmed with so many things and worrying about things that probably won't even happen. Number 8, strategy for de-stressing is to resist overworking. And that's what Jesus did. So he said, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. And then the next verse says, Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the grass. And I think he actually organized them in like groups of 12. So get organized, create a strategy, organize your environment, organize your team, get more people involved in accomplishing the goal, create order in your world. That's basically what it is, creating order in your world. I think there's even a book by that. But what do you need to sort out or organize? Ask yourself that. And who can help you? And what is your first step in going forward? This is a lot of times where we play that martyr syndrome. Just like Mary and Martha did, where Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus and Martha was saying, hey, I got to cook for all of you and I need some help. And my sister Mary is just sitting there listening to Jesus. I need some help here, so I need to organize. But Martha went on to just ramble and tell people about how overworked she was instead of just looking for a solution. It also is a good place to think about who else can help you. You know, maybe there are some other people that can do the grocery shopping for you, do the cooking for you. How can you set boundaries so that you're not wasting your time on tasks that you could delegate? Remember, delegate was number 2. We talked about how can you delegate. Start making a list, a daily to-do list. I used to think that I could put 6 things on my to-do list today. I'm telling you, the older I get and the busier I get, I'm lucky if I get 3 things done on my list. So now I'm just focusing on 3 things because I'm a big list maker and I like to see things crossed off. And if I have 6 things on my list and I only get to 3, I get frustrated. So I've only put 3 things on my to-do list. And actually, I think I just read an article in Forbes or Fortune magazine that said most successful people only list 3 major to-dos a day. So you can at least get those accomplished and not be frustrated at the end of the day. So strategy number 9 for not feeling overwhelmed and overworked is to resist slipping away from good habits. So what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what it means. We need to stay praying, stay healthy, and stay on schedule. Nurture yourself first. It's really about the oxygen mask theory. If you're flying in an airplane and the oxygen mask comes down, they always say put yours on first and then help someone. So we need to remember what are the good habits that we can instill in our lives that are going to keep us healthy, body, mind, and spirit. And sometimes, frankly, staying on a schedule is the only sanity I have in my day. When life seems totally crazy, if I can keep on a routine, keep on a schedule, know what's going to be coming up, that helps me get through the rough parts. So Jesus said to these disciples, after they assessed the situation, put everybody in groups, he said, now, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. They all ate and were satisfied. And we know at the end of the story that there were even more leftovers than they could even use. So think about good habits that can just give you a sense of well-being and continuing to pray. What's important to your general well-being? What refocuses you or re-energizes you? What's your oxygen mask? I know for me it's regular sleep. It's also time out at a prayer cabin or someplace that I can go and be alone and be quiet. It's playing worship music or reading something that is just going to calm you down. They talk about harp music is angels music. It's totally going to calm you down. Family meal times. That was something that was really important to my family, talking about no matter how busy we got growing up, family meal time was non-negotiable as I was growing up. And I also did that when I was raising my son. Family meal time is non-negotiable. Even to this day, my husband and I take time out. Meal time is non-negotiable. That's where we can check in with each other. And when I was young, that's where I learned the art of conversation and politics. That's where we talked about current events. So it wasn't just about what did we do in our day, which is important, and checking in with each other, but it was talking about bigger issues at hand and just really learning how to have a conversation. So then when we were older and with adults, we could really be intelligent and have a conversation. So I think getting away from good habits when you're frustrated is the worst thing you can do. Keep praying, stay healthy, stay on a schedule. All right, strategy number 10 for being stress-free. Resist becoming over-anxious. Verse 48 in Mark chapter 6 talks about Jesus seeing the disciples being totally stressed, and they were on a lake in a storm, actually. And it says, he saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out with them, walking on the lake. He was about to pass them by, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed. I love when I read that verse because I suppose I would be amazed, but why are we constantly amazed when we cast our cares on Jesus and he gives us that peace that passes all understanding, but we have to do it over and over again. So when your day is stressful and it takes on a crisis, remember that Jesus cares deeply about you and he cares about your stress level. It's really faith. It's where rubber meets the road. And it's about having spiritual eyes to see Jesus in the midst of your crisis. Now, what can you do to reclaim peace and security so that you don't capsize in the crisis? You know, I was talking about harp music. It really is therapeutic if you can just get something that you can play that just really is soothing. If you find yourself being stressed, a lot of people use essential oils, breathe in deeply. Just breathing, the conscious action of breathing can cause you to just not be so anxious. But at the end of the day, remember that God is sovereign, and even in the furnace of affliction, he will not let you burn. That's from Daniel chapter 3, verse 19 through 30 is the whole story about the fiery furnace. And just remember, God did not set you up for failure. God did not set you up to burn in the fires of crisis. He really is looking for you to deepen your faith. Stay close to the shepherd. The winds are always calm when Jesus is in your boat, but you need to call on him. That was the big lesson I learned in those verses. You can be afraid and you can get totally wound up in your own stuff, but if you focus your eyes on Jesus, invite him into the boat with you, that's when you can find that peace that passes all understanding. That's what you can find, that one common thread that is just going to de-stress your life and give you the refreshment and the renewal you need to move forward. So I just want you to remember that, staying close to the shepherd, not getting stressed out. Take some time to think about the things that you can start eliminating. Think about the daily, the weekly tasks that you can start to delegate. Find time to create a little mini Sabbath or a day of rest. Find the things that can rejuvenate you and just speak to your soul. Don't get caught up in everybody else's business. Focus on your own, but own up and face your own problems. I really believe that God has so much more for you when you're not stressed, when you're not anxious. And frankly, most of your crises, if you just stop worrying about them, they're going to go away. They're going to take care of themselves. But we need to constantly pray, constantly stay healthy, stay on a schedule, and nurture yourself. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you will have a de-stressed week. Hey everyone, this is Christy Lynn Olson. Have you downloaded the new Women Infused app? It's available both on the Apple Store and Google Play. My passion is to see God's daughters take back territory stolen by the enemy and empower them to live healed and whole in every area of their life. I'm gathering the most amazing women in this community of broadcasters to help teach marketplace women what they need to know about living out their best life in health and in wellness and in their faith in the workplace. More networks are going to be added as we grow. You see, our goal is to reach 1 million women around the globe through this free app, and you can help by telling all your friends about the app and downloading it yourself. So go to your favorite app store, either Apple Store or Google Play, and download our free app today. Make sure you tell your friends and join this sisterhood of spirit-filled women of influence. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you on the app.
This has been Women Infused Radio, connecting women around the globe with purpose and spirit. And we want to connect with you. Get your free gift, Unveiled Voices, 6 things you need to do to define your value, voice, and vision. For more information on the free gift and links to join the conversation on social media, visit us at ChristyLynnOlson.com.